Hi everyone, we're going to talk about radicals today. And I'm going to start off with the square root because the square root is the most common radical, the one we use the most often. And what I want to do, I want to mention that the word radical is actually talking about the symbol that you use when you do a square root. Now, when we do square roots, what we're actually doing is the inverse of squaring something or raising it to the second power. Now, what I mean by that, let's take a look at a simple example of an exponent. If I asked you guys what is 4 to the second power, or 4 squared, that means 4 times 4, the answer would be 16. Now the square root works that question backwards. We say the square root of 16 equals 4 because 4 squared equals 16. So squaring means raising to the second power. Square rooting means the opposite of that. Meaning one question goes this way, takes the 4, you square it, and you get 16. The other question goes this way, takes the 16, you square root it, and you get 4. Now, square roots are not the only radicals. A lot of times, we see a number in front of the radical. Like, and I gave you a couple examples here. I said you might see the third root, or we sometimes call it the cube root of 8, or you might see the fifth root of x. So what we're doing, we're seeing this little number here out front. This 3 or this 5 means it's not a square root anymore, it's a different root. Now the way it works, the number in front of the radical matches up with the power of the inverse function. So a cube root, or a third root, is the inverse of x to the third power. A fifth root is the inverse of x to the fifth power. So what we have here, the cube root of x means exactly that, the cube root of x, or you could say the third root of x, and it's the inverse of x to the third power. The fourth root of x is the inverse of x to the fourth. And I'm just going to put this dot, dot, dot in the notes because you can see the pattern. The fifth root of x is the inverse of x to the fifth. The 10th root of x is the inverse of x to the 10th, and so on. So when it comes to evaluating a radical, what you have to do is take an exponent question and work it backwards. So for example, if I asked you guys, what is the cube root of 8, or the third root of 8? Then really the question I'm asking you is, what number to the third power equals 8? Or I'm saying there is some number where if I multiply it by itself, the answer would be 8. And you got to figure out what that number is. Now it turns out for this example, the answer is 2. Because 2 to the third power, or 2 times 2 times 2 equals 8. And that's what we're going to be working on today. You guys are going to be practicing your radicals, not just square roots, but all roots. And that's going to lead into our next lesson on fraction exponents.